Welcome to Conscious and Curious with Crystal Schultz, where we deep dive into the questions and mysteries of life. We learn through the personal stories of individuals and topics such as philosophy, esoteric truths, wellness, religion, and spirituality. With meaningful conversations and thought-provoking ideas, we'll learn together and hopefully inspire consciousness and intentional living. Let's dive in. Welcome to Conscious and Curious with Crystal Schultz. I'm here again with Jill Freestone, my good friend and very wise friend who I appreciate so much. We have had some really wonderful conversations, experiences together over time, and we're doing a part 2 for OCD and scrupulosity. So thanks for joining us today. Jill, you did your introduction last time, so we'll just dump that for now. If you want to learn more about Jill, she is a life coach and has done a lot of really amazing work with drumming circles and helping other people with anxiety and anger and healing those aspects. But you can hear more about her introduction in the last episode. But we're going to jump into a little bit more of Jill's experiences and her insights, and then some detailed work of like difference between anxiety versus OCD, why compulsions don't work, different things like that. So, Jill, was there any experiences that you had that you didn't share last time that you find important to mention, or that were really impactful to your journey and getting diagnosed or moving through? Anything you would like to share?
Sure. Right before I got diagnosed, for several months, I was just feeling this really strong anger and resentment towards some things in the church. And one of the issues, if I mention them in particular, was related to garments and the temple recommend question process and how those are required for the temple and then to be sealed and with your family forever in the celestial kingdom.
In the Mormon church.
The Mormon church, Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints, whatever, LDS. In that religion, that is the requirement. And I had been in that mindset. I think it was 44 when I was diagnosed. And for 23 years, I was wearing the garments after I had been to the temple. And so I had been like at the best state mentally. Like I was just doing amazing, but this really strong anger and resentment around this issue was there. And I've had the OCD was showing up in this belief that I should be able to resolve that. I should be able to work through this and it shouldn't be there. And part of this resentment came because I didn't know I had sensory processing disorder. I thought I was just sensitive. And that's another thing with scrupulosity. I wasn't diagnosed because I thought I was just a little scrupulous or rigid. So when we discount those things, sometimes we don't get the right tools to help us. And I was under the belief, because of the things that were taught, that I had to wear the garment 24/7. And there were very minimal times that those were removed. And I was told by my religious leader when I first received my garment that they had to be put back on immediately after those things, especially after intimacy. And that was immediate. That didn't mean, snuggle for a few hours or sleep naked. And we had to answer the question, do you wear them day and night? And so for me, it wasn't just that I overinterpreted this literally, like that's what it said. And many people, if you asked, like, yeah, you have to wear them day and night. You can't sleep naked. You can't take them off just because you feel uncomfortable. Like if your body is uncomfortable or you're irritated, so I was following the rules, but I was feeling physical pain and, rash, irritation, like all the things that are happening in my body, but I had no freedom to take care of my body. And so there's a resentment and anger that's there, but there's the intense fear that if I take these off for any reason, I'm not going to be with my family forever. And God is going to say, sorry, you missed it. Like that's literally what I thought God believed. And even though God loved me, like, no, this is the requirement. And so I didn't understand the intensity of how often I was spending time thinking about this and agonizing about it and researching and trying to solve and figure this out. I thought that was normal. When you have something that you're concerned about or that's a problem, you will do that. The extensive conversations I had with people, especially with my husband, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And, you know, whether it's prayer or searching or whatever, like the amount of time that was spent on this one topic, versus others was extensive. I didn't know that was compulsive, but I had a problem and it needed to be resolved. And there was so much anger that this fabric and this requirement was coming between me and my husband, in between me and the health of my physical skin, and so many other aspects, without going to all the details, that I was trapped because the only option was hell or being an apostate, or it was intense. But then I had this belief of like, well, if I just go to therapy more and get coached more, I won't be bothered by this anymore. So that's the state. And it's so weird to look at it now. Like, that just seems so strange. So stuck in a box, so ignorant, like so lack of the ability to decide for yourself. But if you've been there, and you understand what's there. And so that's when I found, as I'm just searching for help, like, what am I going to do? That's when I found that this could be related to scrupulosity and possibly sensory processing disorder. And I got both of those diagnoses at the same time, and just the intense relief, but then also the anxiety that I already talked about that came about. And, the ability to then, decide what to do, how often, when to remove, what to do, became something that I was taking care of my mental health and my physical health, instead of just fear and shame-based decision, which seems like
Wow.
most people do, but I was stuck in a trap.
That sounds very intense. Thank you for sharing that vulnerable story with us. And I was curious because in church, we constantly have this topic, this thought of, if you just had faith enough. Did
Yeah,
that ever come into play of like, well, the rashes will go away, or the
totally.
issues in my marriage will go away, or anything like that, if I just have more faith? Was that a topic of part of the OCD or the scrupulosity as well?
A little bit. It was also that there's something that was missing. Like if I try hard enough, I'll be able to figure this out. There's going to be a solution, and there's no way it would be not wearing them, because that's not allowed. Like, but there's going to be some solution. And so I just have to study hard enough, like have faith enough, do the right things. It's going to be there.
So is that was the compulsion
Part of it. There's a couple of them.
part of them? Yeah. If I can just find the answer, if I can just,
But I
is the
also,
answer more faith, knowledge?
yeah, I have to also learn more so that I can prevent others from suffering. And I have to share. So there was a lot of layers in there, and I have to correct things. So yeah.
Wow. And that led you to being diagnosed? How did that happen?
Yeah, just me noticing that scrupulosity isn't just the over repenting. It's this belief of that something is like this black and white. It must be right. I must follow the rule. And then there's also this these compulsions that are either just in your head, and the amount of time you're spending time thinking about, communicating about, researching about, trying to solve can be a compulsion, instead of just the repenting part of understanding that there's a lot more to it.
Yeah. So were you spending just avid amounts of time researching and talking with your husband
Oh
and
yeah,
worrying over this
I had
until
been for years.
it
I
was
mean, I did from
impacting
day
your
one.
daily life?
Yeah, totally. But I thought that was just what you do. Why would
Right.
you have a problem, you solve it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem logical? Like,
And you were going to regular therapy already,
mhm.
right? But that wasn't addressing OCD,
No, so
correct?
when I originally went to therapy like 15 years before this, it was for depression, postpartum depression, and for anxiety. And I, it's like, how you are willing to unwrap the onion one layer at a time? Like
Mm,
that one wasn't even on my list yet, because I was just daily survival of depression at that point, you know, young motherhood. And so then once I'd unraveled all these other things, it was like the thing that was left.
right.
But I
So
was
was
still
this
spending all the time thinking about it all that time. And my brain's busy
was
years.
because I see sometimes I think depression or anxiety can come up as sort of like a fever. It's a
Yeah.
symptom of another symptom, right, or another issue. Um, do you feel like the depression, anxiety were symptoms of this?
Well, yes and no. There were multiple things going on. Like there were hormonal changes going on, and there were also lack of sovereignty in any part of my life, And
Mm.
so there were so many layers to it. But when you have this underlying thing like on your skin 24/7, of course it's going to affect the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But when it's something that you don't have any space to even consider it, why would you? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just required. Like we do that.
And it's interesting because I'm considering in myself, one of the things I know brings me down, like mentally and emotionally, is if I'm not comfortable in my clothes.
For sure. Huge.
Like if I feel like I'm wearing something drab that just drives me nuts or it's uncomfortable or it's too tight or something like that,
Mhm.
like I will be probably yelling at my kids. I will be depressed. I'm going to have a bad day.
Huge.
Like,
Huge.
so I can totally see where this issue is like it's something in contact with you 24/7. And no matter what, unless you're swimming, I guess,
Yeah.
then you're essentially in contact with this issue and this
Yeah.
emotion and this turmoil constantly.
Yeah. Well,
So
another
yeah, it makes
example,
sense.
I had these three pregnancies that were really complex, and the third especially, I was on bed rest most of it, and I had sharp varicose veins through the vulva and down the legs, and so I'd had this is back when we wore, you had panel pants that came up to your ribs. The maternity pants were big,
Oh, yes.
and they would
Yep,
come
I
up,
know
and then
those.
you had a big long baggy shirt that would cover, so you'd have two layers of clothes, and then the garments were the same. The garments would come up to your stomach, and then there was a shirt that would cover down, so I had four layers of fabric covering my stomach. And then I had this maternity belt because I was having so much low back pain that was cinching on top of all of that. And then this was back when we had to wear the bra on top of the garment, and so then I have built up sweat and rashing under the bra and under that belt. And then I put a cold frozen pack, like in my crotch,
Inside.
because I've
Yeah.
got these swollen vulvar veins, and I'm putting my feet up,
Oh,
and I'm in that position, and it's July, August, and I have no option. Like I have to wear all of that exactly like that all the time.
right.
And I'm not enjoying it. I'm hurting, the sharp pains, too hot, like too much sweat, causing problems at that time. I didn't even
Mhm.
consider that there was something I could do, or even just for a moment of take it all off and put a sheet over you, like that wasn't an option. And so then you can see how resentment would build when you don't know what to do.
What was at risk, did you feel?
Well,
Because it wasn't an option. What would have
it didn't
been
even
at risk?
occur to me, like, why don't I just remove this and take care of my body? It was, I just need to sit here in pain, like back then.
Yeah.
It was just, this is how bad it is. This is horrible, and I'm stuck. And
But this is the way it is.
this is just the way it is. And then over time, I started thinking, like, this is what's causing the problem. Like, this, if I didn't have to do this, this would be different. But there's no option to not do that because, yeah, covenants, or can't go to the temple, can't be with your family, like God's forever mad at you, like, whatever,
Mhm.
those aren't worth it. I can suffer. Like, we're supposed to be uncomfortable. We're supposed to, sacrifice. That's what our church is about. so,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's very,
Wow.
very confusing for so many years. And being faithful and feeling scrupulously needing to be good too. Like I was
Yeah.
never who did anything wrong, ever. Like perfectionism. And so why would I do that? Why would I
And did you ever like hear of other people that say like, "Oh, when I'm pregnant, I don't wear garments," or something like that? Something that's more in self-authority because it's what they need.
not back then. The only people I saw that didn't wear them was they were just like I saw them as rebellious and doing it for immodest reasons or something back then.
Yeah.
As I got older, there were more people that would say that, closer to when I was diagnosed. This is when I was, my oldest is 25. So It wasn't really as common, internet wasn't, we weren't looking at the internet and all of that. So like when I was getting diagnosed, there were lots of people and lots of people around me who are saying, well, yeah, I don't use them during my period or when I'm pregnant or nursing or whatever. And but still there was, well, that's not an option for me. They're choosing what's wrong.
Right. Yeah, because it is the black and white thinking too, right? Like
Well, the
that's
record
not okay.
says.
Yeah, the church said it
Yeah.
was
So anyway, yeah,
not
that's
not
just,
just interpretive, it was what was told.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I have one more example with that. My best friend was in my ward. We got married 1 week apart from each other. And years later, I told her this story and she's like, what? We would have had the same interview. Like, I don't remember him telling me that. And she's not rigid or black and white at all. And she said, if he told me that, I would have said, whatever. Like the authority that she had, raised by a mom who was a convert and just more of that is not a religious right, for you to say that specific thing.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating to see that really.
Or it might not have even entered her mind
Yeah, if she heard
if
him
he
say
did
it,
say it.
yeah, she was just,
Yeah.
yeah, at that point in my life, though, that man in that position of authority spoke for God.
Right. Yeah.
It was very direct at that point in my life. So that made sense that I was like, okay,
Well, and tell me if this is true for you. In my experience, I was constantly looking for
the right thing.
as much direction and as
Totally.
much guidance in my scrupulosity as possible. So it was like, tell me what to do.
Well,
Tell
I
me,
need to know.
and I'm going to follow to the
Exactly.
letter, whatever. Right. So
Yeah.
if somebody said or even dropped a hint, and especially if it came from a leadership position, I'd been like, okay, all over that and watch how I'm going to be so diligent and so
Yep.
loyal. Right. Was
Yeah.
that the same?
Totally. Totally. But I didn't know that that was different than other people.
Right.
I thought that's what you did because I was raised in a house that like that. My dad was like that, and if one of my family members didn't do what was right, they got in trouble and they were like wrong. They were bad. They were doing what was bad. So that's how black and white it was.
Yeah. Now, what do you think? Because the thought keeps coming to mind of the word zealot, right? Is there a difference between being a zealot and being scrupulous?
Well, what's your definition of a zealot?
I know, right? I should look it up. Let's look it up.
Well,
What's
that's
the definition?
is to make sure that we're thinking on the same page and that my definition matches. But so
Right.
in my the way I was raised in my house, the extreme orthodox, very, I don't know if you call it zealot, just doing everything exactly right, doing everything that's asked. That was the way you lived. And if you didn't live that way, you were wrong, you were bad, you were selfish, you were not sacrificing, you were apostate, whatever. And there was no room to ask or like say that the brethren might be wrong or something to question that. Again, that's how I interpreted my experience growing up. My siblings didn't experience it the same way as I did.
Right. Yeah.
And and so I experienced it very intense. And it's not like my parents' fault or their problem. This is my interpretation of the experience. My dad is a lot like me, so it makes sense. Again, it's not their intent. It's not their fault. Like this is just the lens that I absorb things.
Right. Yes, correct. Yeah. Okay. The definition of zealot says a person who is fanatical and uncompromising in pursuit of their religious, political, or other ideals. But the root of the word comes from zealous. Sorry, not zealous. Zealot comes from zeal. So zeal, which is interesting because the word zeal to me is like so much happier.
Positive.
It's like I have zeal in my soul to like love other people, or I have zeal to help other people. But to be a zealot, I mean, that sounds pretty OCD to be fanatical about religious, um, being uber religious, essentially. Uh,
Cycle for sure.
yeah. So it could be the same definition in a lot of ways, except that it can apply to other things. So really, it could be an um, OCD compulsion anyway, because it can be applied to political and other realms.
Yeah. Well, it's like the things that are healthy for us can become unhealthy and then they can be an obsession. and, remembering to turn things off and to do what's important to you and follow your list of things that are important are valuable skills. So then if they become urgent and obsessive, then it's hurting you more than helping you.
Do you have any thoughts on why some people like, because we're talking about in religion, right? Some of these things are encouraged because we're getting praise. Not that they're doing it consciously necessarily, but just there's praise for people who are being perfectionist. And there's a lot of times people who have perfectionism or OCD or scrupulosity end up in leadership positions because they look so on point. Do you think it comes down to you were predisposed to having OCD, like compared to your siblings who didn't end up in the same mental space as you did? Do you think it's more predisposed or were raised into it or both?
So that's a nature nurture question. And the research, some of it is conclusive, some isn't. But like the percentages of family members that have a sibling with it, like there's a lot of numbers and things we could show, but it's rare that everyone does in a family. But it is genetic. Like there is a genetic component that they're finding to it, meaning that you will have a family member generally, but usually they're not diagnosed. and and so that yes and no to that question. If I was raised in an environment that was not rigid at all, what would have happened to me? We don't have those answers, right? Like if
Right.
it was a very sovereign, very free thinking, honoring, and like celebrating those aspects, would I have become different? We don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all
Yeah.
have that different,
Could
like
be
inner
either
part of
or.
ourselves that we come with, you know,
Mhm.
but it also that nature can shift it in different directions.
Yeah. It's a good point. Well, I let's go to your insights and some of your takeaways.
Okay.
Having been through this process and being diagnosed and working through this for so much, what are some of your insights?
Yeah. I think one of the things that is really helpful is to be able to notice the difference between your thinking self and your observing self perspectives. We talked a little bit about that, but to notice when a thought comes in, like, I'm not kind or I'm not doing something right. And then to be able to say, I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I'm not kind, that separation state.
Mm,
Or I'm anxious. No, I am an anxious person. No, I'm noticing I'm having the feeling of anxiety. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I'm anxious. So that one is really helpful um, with anything, but especially with OCD to just label it out, separate that. And I think another big one is most people with scrupulosity have faulty assumptions about God's character. And that's
mm.
one that really is problematic and is really hard to shift from the fear, shame based, the angry, disappointed, vindictive God to a merciful, kind, unconditionally loving. That one takes a lot of shifting. And I've noticed that that one was really painful for me, but I've noticed just as an insight, like watching for that, is helpful to see how that's taught, how it's interpreted, and what people really believe deep inside.
That's a big one. It's
Huge.
really big,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's
There's a
there.
lot of cognitive dissonance there where it's like, but God was vengeful and he destroyed this whole city, but he loves me and all his children. What does this mean, right?
Yeah.
There's
It
a
takes
middle ground there you have to find.
a lot of dissonance to be able to do that and to be able to do a lot of holding two truths and sitting with the gray. So that one can be very challenging, especially when someone's constantly in a trigger and then they keep coming back to like, I must do that. So that one can be really hard for people who've had like undiagnosed scrupulosity most of their life. And it's demanding that they change their entire worldview. I'm like, that's very terrifying. So there's a lot of people who get just stuck in that of like, I'm not going to do the therapy. Like, that's just too much. I can't go there. Some of the things that are really helpful is to be able to acknowledge that the scrupulous mind is talking, whatever you call it, if it's OCD, if it's scrupulosity, if it's your protector, if it's a bully, whatever you call it, that you can say, like, I'm in charge. There is a part of me, the self part of me that like I can acknowledge the internal events that are happening and I can choose that just I can do that. I can trust myself, actually. That part of me, if I can get to that energy, I can trust myself to move toward my values. And so, what you want to do is just acknowledge the OCD or your mind, whatever you call it, like, thanks, mind, you're worrying about me as usual. We'll just have to see, instead of you're right, you're wrong, or this is true. So you're staying with uncertainty, like, I hear you, just that acknowledgement and moving back. Or perhaps, or I don't know, you may be right. That's possible. I might not know for sure. And then redirecting to the present moment, so that that's how you get unhooked or to diffuse from it, and being able to do that. So, or you could say, like, I have OCD. It wouldn't be helpful for me to engage in that thought. That's not very
Mm,
helpful for me right now. Oh, that's an unwanted obsession. I'm not going to let it lure me into compulsions right now. Whatever. I don't know. So that kind of an approach to unhook is really, really useful.
right.
I,
That reminds me of when we talked at your house too, of just learning to be able to sit in the discomfort, right? Learning to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like you're not going to know. And no matter how much OCD tendencies we try and they might release some of the pressure, we still don't know. We don't have that security. So learning to be okay with sitting with that discomfort.
yeah. Another part is like listing all the areas in your life that you actually are okay with uncertainty, because we don't really recognize those very often. And like getting a big list, like, wow, I've learned to accept all of these other things, but it's these little pinpoint areas that OCD is getting me to fixate on. And I think you mentioned this a little bit in the last podcast, but this idea that you're in charge. And in Annabella's book, it talks about, if you have this analogy that you're in a boat and you're the captain of the boat, and that as you're going along, you pick up these passengers that you didn't really want them to come on, but they're intrusive and they show up. And that's your thoughts and feelings that just show up. And they're getting really mad and they're revolting and they're getting wild and it's getting really uncomfortable. And those are the unhelpful thoughts and feelings. And they're trying to tell you where to go. They're trying to tell you that's dangerous. And it seems helpful when you're going to places that are kind of scary and overwhelming, and they tell you to take an easier route. But as the captain, you want to choose your own route and you're not sure what to do. And the waters are getting turbulent and it feels like you can't see the way. And the passengers are yelling out their opinions, do this, do this. And so sometimes you just follow them to keep them quiet. And
Mm-hmm.
they're just really becoming bullies. And you feel like you have no say in what's happening every day on this boat. And it feels like you're no longer in charge of your life because you've made deals with them. And like, that's just very similar to what's going on. And it can happen so subtly. And you again can feel stuck on this boat because what you jump over and you drown.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say that they feel like that. So yeah.
Not to mention the weather on the outside of the boat. That's all the
Yeah.
circumstances you still can't control, right?
Yeah. And like
You can't control the wind.
a little bit more with the analogy of, like, you may have tried to ask the loudest and the most intimidating passenger, which is, the thoughts in these circumstances, to leave. Like, you're messing up your journey. But then when you try to ignore them, they get louder and louder and louder, which is what an obsession will do. And then, like, you're so exhausted, you might not realize that there are some helpful and friendly passengers, and it's hard to tell. Like, and you can't really hear the helpful ones because they're trying to get rid of the loud ones too. And so, like, how can you learn to be that captain of your boat and to act for yourself and not get bossed by these unhelpful passengers and focus on what you can control and what your values are? So it's very complicated.
Yeah. I really like this analogy because it helps put it in perspective. Like consider that our self-authority is the captain's authority, right? So too often we're growing up, and I'd say especially as women, we're growing up with this idea that it's somebody else's job to be in charge, right? So we're constantly being fed this idea, or at least I was fed this idea that other people are meant to be in charge. And as an OCD, I would have the consistent compulsive thought of like, okay, well then I'm not smart enough. I'm not I'm not clever enough. I don't know enough. I'm misunderstood constantly. And like if only they knew that I knew something, then I would be able to be the captain of my ship. They would believe in me and I could get all these little voices to listen to me, right? But the authority of that captain, like only the captain can say, yeah, I believe in my own authority, so I'm going to tell you this is our route, instead of waiting for all these other voices to say, okay, we believe you. That's not going to happen. The captain has to decide that as him or
Yeah.
herself. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. I like that analogy a lot.
is like the victim analogy too. Even though you are the captain, we sometimes fall into that. Like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
I'm not the victim. I am in charge, but it just feels like I can't. So that one was a really strong insight and a really hard thing to claim. Another one is that religion and God truly are based in infinite love and mercy, not shame and fear and punishment. If I look for the roots and what's real and what the real intentions are behind things. Um, like that's tricky, but that, and like really believing that I can handle uncertainty and how highly uncomfortable that is really believing like, and that's with the exposures over and over again. Yes, I really can handle that. And then shifting to believe that faith is actually uncertainty, not knowledge.
Right. Isn't that interesting? Is I remember growing up thinking, where's the DIY of faith? I don't understand this. Like, what is faith? How do you have faith? And I'm like, I just have to believe everything's going to work out, but not in practice, not in theory. Like, it was so much ethereal theory
Totally.
that I couldn't really grasp. Okay. So I've come to a lot of my own terms that are alternate words for kind of like you mentioned last episode, my alternate words, right? For faith, which is like surrender,
Mm.
right? Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one phrase that I learned at a Reiki training actually was surrendering control of the outcome.
Mm.
And that helped me a
Mm-hmm.
lot. In fact, I probably went to that training specifically for that
Yeah, I love that.
because I don't practice Reiki, um, but that whole concept of like, what is faith actually? Certainty is not faith. And I've mentioned before is that in a lot of ways, religion is just teaching certainty.
Yeah,
Um, and not to knock, I think there's a lot of good things in religion as well, but especially the way we take it, right? Because everybody's going to take it differently. And I had some interesting conversations recently with some family members, and I'm going, how did you not grow up with the same mentality I did? We were taught the same things.
exactly.
How are
Yeah.
you in more self-authority, or did you
Yes.
not take it that way? Right. So it is a lot depending on how we understood or took it. But
Mhm.
faith is the opposite of certainty. I
Yeah.
appreciate that so much. And that's the uncomfortableness. I don't know. And I always say that I could be wrong.
Yes.
Things that I believe, there are many things that I believe personally, and I will still come back even saying like, this is why I believe it. And this is what's happened, or these are my experiences. And I'll still say, but I could be wrong.
Exactly. Yeah, just that belief that uncertainty is actually good. Like that one is a really big shift that it's actually freeing if you don't have to know
Yeah.
and you don't have to figure it all out and that you actually can't. It's just this releasing and the surrender you're talking about that this is actually, if I choose to believe in God and religion, that's actually where we're going, is to just have this complete, yeah, whatever word works for you. If faith doesn't work for you, that's what faith is. Faith is just hope. It's just believing, it's choosing. But we have different scriptures or songs or things that we interpret them as a black and white. And like you said, I have family members that are like, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean knowledge. So,
Right.
yeah. Yeah. So just the
Oh,
belief
yes.
again, I get to choose my values and my actions, even if I find myself thinking a different way. And then my faith actually is completely different, but way stronger. Like after doing the therapy and understanding scrupulosity, there was a part where I thought when it was falling apart, like I can't still have faith or I can't be religious for a while. But then like being able to realize that, wait, I have way more confidence. I have way more faith. I'm not afraid of God. I'm not not afraid of these things. I'm not worried about my choices as much. I still sometimes fall into worried about what other people will think, stuff like that. I'm way more gracious and merciful to other people, like in wherever they're at, whatever they're doing, and way lower in the need to have to save other people, and less urgency, and more of this understanding that I will be misunderstood.
Yeah.
I will. And that's part of uncertainty. And this understanding of all of this training, even and all this suffering, usually, if we want to, we can look at, wow, that's awesome that I changed to a much better person because of all this, right? If you want to, you don't have to look for the silver lining. And it's so easy for me to catch it and to help people get help. Like, oh, that's beautiful.
Hmm.
And then I guess the last insight would be that any amount of OCD or scrupulous tendencies is enough to check and get help. Because, like I said earlier, like I discounted things because life
Yeah.
is so much better.
How are you now? Are you at peace? Do you find yourself
Yeah, I have been
overthinking
for years.
constantly?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Just like in general in peace. If I'm not, it's because maybe I didn't do the grounding we talk about, throughout the day or in the morning, or maybe OCD has grabbed me and I didn't notice it. There's normal, like, as far as OCD is what we're talking about, there's normal life stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
like, it's what you call, like, some people call it healed or in remission or whatever. Like, you've done the treatment, you're at this low stage where it doesn't grab you much at all. There may be a life event or it might jump to something else where then you need to go back to therapy for a little bit. Where, like, a year ago, I went in for a little tune up and learned more skills and did some different things. And it wasn't this like dramatic anxiety producing, like, as the first time. It was just okay, like, just like a little tweaking, refining, like you do at the dentist or something.
Going in for checkup.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't find that it's impacting you daily anymore or consistently anymore. It's just when needed.
Well, it
Or
depends
do
what you mean
you?
by impacted. Like, the subtle little things might show up once a day, of like the way I hear something and I'm like, or like my husband will tell a joke and I'll take it literally. Like, I take everything very black and white. It's like, it's just part of me. And so then I'll be like, that's not funny, or don't say that. And then I'm like, just like, relax.
Relax.
Really,
Yeah.
like, or I'll say, you used that word wrong, like, this words need to be used correctly. And okay, don't be the police. Just like little things like that that are also
Yeah.
OCD of like, I must fix, I must like, or just like, I mean, those are really subtle and they don't sound like, oh, that's ruining your life for OCD. But when it's causing a conflict, like in your ability to just
Hmm.
relationship and a conversation, like, that's
Well,
little.
and it sounds like then the wheel, right? In
Yeah.
the
It's a
OCD
spin.
cycle you brought up in the last episode of the triggers don't necessarily go away, right? And I
No.
imagine it's the same with anybody who's like in remission or yeah, recovery. That's the word.
Yeah.
So if
Recovery.
anybody is in recovery, like it's not that there's never going to be triggers anymore.
No, OCD doesn't go away. The intensity of how
Right.
much you feel it and how often it shows up reduces with exposure therapy, but it still shows up. And it's just that I notice it real fast. And
And you stop yourself.
I don't go through the cycle.
Right.
Extremely rare do I go through the cycle, or do I
Yeah.
spend time with it. Just so that feels free. Like, I'm free from it in that way.
Well, and to me, it sounds like one of the byproduct gifts is that because going through the treatments, like you mentioned, it brings you to this consciousness. It brings you to forefront of consciousness, like, okay, and this curiosity and looking at it, practicing the pause, all of those things sound like the gift that you've been given outside of this
Yeah.
of, okay, we've gone through this cycle, we've gone through OCD, but now I have the gift of being able to, if something triggers, because we're always triggered, we will have triggers, and to have the practice constantly of I can come to consciousness, I can look at it with curiosity, I can stop myself from going through this cycle and assuming or judging or
Mhm.
needing control of the situation. And then what a gift that is.
Yeah.
Because
It's
that to me is like that's one of the greatest things we can do in this life is to practice consciousness.
yeah. Yeah. So then it affects every other area of my life in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, like, yeah, going through that was hell, but wow, to live at a different place is beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's exhausting just because it shows up and I'm just like, give me a break. Like, I'm done trying to translate stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
So they're like, can I just go into something and experience it more like my husband does? But then at the same time, like, no, I have gifts and depth because of this too. So it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when, like, there's two quotes from Dr. McClendon's book that really describe the intensity of OCD that I think is really good to see, is that, I mean, there's different intensities for people. And it says OCD sets off a false fire alarm in safe circumstances.
Mhm.
It's just like wanting to check until there is no fire. People who experience these negative moral emotions, which I don't call them negative emotions, just want to do the right thing to get rid of them. Typically, a series of complex compulsive behaviors is set in motion to track down what wrong thing there was so they can make it right. So there's a lot in there, but it makes more sense when you think about it that way. that it's a false alarm. It is safe, but there it's intensity like a fire that we've got to find the thing and make it right and save the lives.
Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Even
this,
in safe situations.
yeah. And there's a personal experience. The person said, Scrupulosity took what I loved most in my life, my faith, my children, my identity as a mother, the hope of being able to live in the celestial kingdom with my family. And it ripped those things away from me. It was like everything good in my life was tied to a stone, and that stone was just heavy enough to sink those dreams down to the dark waters of the lake. The awful thing was, I felt like I was the only one that dropped the stone. I just couldn't be righteous enough to hold on to everything I held most dear. And another said, I felt hopeless, alone, abandoned, terrified, and damned. But worst of all, that I deserved it. And most people I talk to, because this isn't well known, this isn't talked about much, that you really do feel that it is your fault and you are suffering and you just need to do better. And early in my suffering, people did tell me that, like when I had postpartum depression, you need to scripture, temple, pray more and serve more, and that will heal it. But this is a literal mental illness, and you can't religion your way out of it. And another quote from that same one is, I know it's OCD when I respond to it like it's the most important thing in my life. And that's another thing to just notice, like how intense is that response?
I love that you brought up you can't religion your way out of it because, yeah, so often that is a prescription for so many people. And that is feels like a stab to the heart, right? When it's like, you have no idea how much I'm already doing and it's taking every ounce of my mental capacity and then yeah, and then it takes over all those other things like your second quote because you're just so determined to be perfect and to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, those doing things are usually compulsions for a person with scrupulosity. So that's just keeping it wound tighter and tighter in that cycle.
Wow.
Keep doing it, and then it gets tighter and tighter, and it's like every hour, every minute. Like I talk to people that it's just all day long.
That quote from the first one that you mentioned about feeling the stone, there's a stone sinking you constantly. Was that your experience as well?
Well, see, for me, it wasn't every area of my life at that time. Like I had already unpeeled so many layers of my life, and it wasn't affecting like every area of my religious. Like it was like a couple areas of religion and a couple areas of moral, ethical things. But it was showing up in my head a lot. But it wasn't like every area was triggering me. Like
Hmm.
I have some people that just everything they hear and everything they see is constant, like complete exhaustion, like every relationship, every conversation, you know. So there's a
Right. Yeah.
intensity level there. But like even if I only have one thing, I could think about it all day long.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you had this in your experience. In my experience, I remember being it was before I went to college, and I was my entire life was looking just comparing myself to people constantly because it was, well, if they can make it or if they can be as this perfect and I'm not that perfect, right? And it was enhancing the triggers and the compulsions constantly. And I have one relative who is near my age, and I just thought this was right before college, and I thought I'm watching her so intently, and she is near perfect. Like, yeah, I mean, like nobody's perfect. I know nobody's perfect, but like she's so close. So if that's the case, I am so not okay. Like, there's no way I can make it. Like that quote actually really spoke to me. It was like everybody else, even if I had the proof that she wasn't, I'd be like, yeah, but it's me. I
Yeah.
definitely I just don't qualify. I'm just not there. I'm not good enough. And that's the illness part, right? The mental illness of it.
Yeah. That's part of the diagnostic criteria too, is that you usually discount yourself, that you don't count. Like everybody else could have the atonement apply to them, or they could have some imperfections, and God would love them no matter what. But I have to live a higher standard. And
Yeah. I'm my own worst enemy.
totally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think
Whereas
one of
like,
the other things that we talked about is like when you're questioning religion, how do you know if it's a normal, healthy questioning or if it's this scrupulosity that's causing you to doubt your religion? And
mm,
it has a lot of crossover, but when you look at it, you can see that scrupulous doubts are going to return like the same ones over and over again. And even if you get sufficient theological answers and you kind of feel like you get a good answer, and you kind of feel a little bit of relief, it's very fleeting and short lived. And it's going to keep coming back and keep coming back, that same thing. And normal spiritual questioning can usually be satiated somehow, that we can come to a point, but the obsessive compulsiveness won't. And
Interesting.
yeah, and so then the normal kind of seeking for answers usually can be bracketed to reasonable times of the day. Like, I'm going to think about this now for a little while. I mean, some people get into something and they're excited about it and might think about it all day, but there's a difference that you can see. Like, but the obsessive doubting and trying to solve will take over a large portion of your day, or like your field of vision where it's hard to focus on what you're doing in the present moment. Like you're going to be doing something and it's just there in front of your face a lot of the time, distracting you from what you're doing and your conversations or driving or anything. And it's just hard to engage in other things. And that's where it's kind of interfering in your daily life, where you
Yeah.
would maybe choose to not go do things and you're just focused on this and unwilling to see or unable to.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that too of like I'm just thinking in terms of like say like a teenager experience like oh all of us friends and they're all good kids but all of us friends we're gonna go and watch a movie or something and it's like but there's too much at stake here. What if it's not a good movie and what if it's not this right then all of a sudden isolating and it's interfering with my social activity.
Mm-hmm.
It's interfering with going anywhere because I'm not sure that
Mm-hmm.
I'll be okay because something might come up that's not
Yeah.
okay and then it's on my shoulders.
Yeah. Great example. Yeah. You know what? This just leads right into what we were going to talk about, like the OCD of the Holy Ghost or Satan or something, because like the
Mm.
kid might say, well, I feel uncomfortable, so it must be the Holy Ghost telling me not to go to this. And, or while I'm there and at this scene, makes me feel uncomfortable. And then I keep thinking about, oh, I'm doing something wrong. And so it's really tricky because
Hmm.
part of this is letting yourself feel uncomfortable. And that isn't the Holy Ghost.
Right.
This is part of OCD. And they all have a lot of overlap. And it's tricky, but it is also tricky when we talk about our thoughts being good or bad or those kind of things. But it's better to like set all of that aside and get the therapy and the healing, and then start to see if you can have a grounded sense of, I know what OCD sounds like, and know that like Satan's not going to talk to me through OCD. The spirit's not going to talk to me through OCD in that urgent or this scary way. And whatever you feel or your beliefs about your higher power, that like, let's separate that. And also remember that when you're feeling high anxiety or high adrenaline or cortisol, that could even block your sensitivity to the spirit. And notice, like, if I'm not sure what it is, how about if I use my anxiety skills to ride through this wave and get back down and then check in with the spirit
Hmm.
and not discount discomfort. And you can also, when you're living in a high state of chronic anxiety, you can experience some spiritual numbness or this confusion that feels like stupor, like, oh, this is a no. So again, getting the therapy, getting the treatment, getting yourself back down to a more level place until you can feel that. And like the spirit might come and give you an uncomfortable feeling when something is wrong, but it's not going to be like urgent the way OCD is, and it's going to be
Yeah.
conflict, right? And like, but there's this, you really want to get to know OCD before you try to like, is it this, is it that, so take that.
Yeah.
Or like maybe you go in to confess something and you might feel embarrassment and a little nervous anxiety, and you might think, oh, then that means I'm still guilty. But like, no, that's normal part of it. Like that's normal to feel embarrassed. It's normal to feel nervous, but it's mild amount. It's not like an intense toxic amount that you might have felt that over and over again, thinking you have to confess over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So
And practicing grounding, like we talked about before, of like, okay, every day for me, I'm as much as possible. I have a newborn, but as much as possible, at least taking a moment to get in a space where I'm me
mm-hmm.
and I'm safe and I'm at peace and I'm at calm. And so maybe that's outside, maybe that's standing in the grass, maybe that's meditating, maybe that's being in the quiet and maybe it's just during the day, like taking 10 seconds to just walk away for a minute, come
Yeah.
over to a place where I can remember this is what it feels like to feel grounded. And that scripture, what is it in is it Second Timothy? Now I can't remember the reference, but I have not given you a spirit of fear,
Yeah.
but of peace and a calm. Oh, now I'm going to forget the rest. I should have had it written down, but it just came to my mind. So
Yeah.
let it see. A spirit of peace and of calm heart and a sound mind. Is that it? That scripture always just like, oh man, okay, that makes just adopting that whole idea, that belief, and holding on to that instead of the control and
Yeah.
trying to avoid all the discomfort.
Yeah.
Okay, I can be at peace. I can that's God for me, right? And whenever I'm like, I could be wrong, I could be wrong, I'm like, am I wrong? Well, let's check in here. Do I feel a spirit of peace? Do I feel a sound mind and a calm heart? Then I feel pretty okay. Then I think this is good for me. I think this is right.
Hmm. Yeah. Yes to all of that. And I think another one with if it's OCD or like the spirit prompting you to do something, like sometimes that happens to me of like somebody's in need of my help and I need to go save them. But like that happens to me like multiple times a day, every single day. And
Mhm.
like, so that whole thing, Camilla Kimball, like never suppress a generous thought. Like, what if my generous thoughts are OCD?
Oh, that was a bad one for me.
Yeah.
I definitely took that to an OCD level myself. Yes.
Because I'm literally getting these thoughts that pop into my head about people I know that are struggling and I could help them in this way. And it like pops into my
Yeah.
head. It happens every day.
I was also told if you have the opportunity to help someone and you don't, it's a sin. I
Yes,
don't know if you
yes,
heard that one. Oh
yes.
my gosh, then every turn I took, I getting
I'm
off the
sitting
bus and oh my gosh, I didn't help everybody off the bus. I'm
constantly.
sitting, right? Like it's wild how extreme these things
Yeah.
can go.
So I
Yeah.
finally learned that sentence isn't helpful for me.
Yeah.
And for me, I because the frequency that I'm having those thoughts pop into my head, that I think about that person. I have to give myself some space and decide, like, because I love helping people. And so then I just decide,
Yeah.
hey, does that fit into my day or my week? Is there a place next week that it fits? Is this just too much? And to be able to handle that, it happens to me, like I said, every day. And so sometimes
Yeah.
it's, could I give myself 2 hours or 2 days and just let it sit so that I'm not acting on a compulsion if it is, and that if it
Mhm.
is the spirit, I will feel like if I set it aside for 2 hours, like there would be something else that would come and say, well, no, this is urgent in a spiritual way, not urgent in an OCD way. It's
Yeah.
hard to know. And
Yeah.
so anyway, just giving it space of like practicing, well, I'm going to do the compulsion, but I'm going to wait 2 hours for, and then I'm going to wait 2 days and then 2 weeks. And that gives you the practice of stretching it out and just
Yeah.
noticing that OCD is more, and anxiety is more like generalized, and the spirit is usually narrow to a focus thing. And there's more of that fear, panic, urgency, no love, sense of crisis with anxiety, where the spirit usually doesn't talk in that
Mhm.
way. This is more compulsive. Spirit is more clear, more thoughtful, more hope versus despair and uncertainty and exhaustion. Like just
Oh yeah.
spell that out, but it's very tricky.
Yeah. Uh, Something I did want to ask you, I thought this was a really interesting direction was intuition versus compulsion. What are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by intuition? Do you mean like checking with your self energy? Or like, is it me or is it an
Yeah,
thought? What do you mean?
I guess. Yeah. So in my definition, I'd say intuition is my true self in divine connection,
Mm-hmm.
knowing the best way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And the compulsion would be, I guess, my mind taking over. I guess I'm defining my my verses here. Um, the compulsion would be more of my mind and my fear and my need for control taking over, but they can both look like thoughts as they come to our mind. Like, how would we differentiate? What's your opinion?
I think it's what we've talked about already about, can I get grounded to tell? And can I wait? Can I not
And
respond?
the peace.
Yeah. Can I get grounded and remember, is this in alignment with my values? And is this something that pulls me toward or away? Like that's part of ACT, and just making a call there. Is it pulling me toward my values or away from my values? Am I in my self energy? Okay, can I get there? Now I am. Can I sense a little bit better? And if I'm not sure, let's give it a pause and see.
That's hard though with the towards values or away from values because it's like, yeah, it's in my values to help people. But when it became a compulsion,
No, it's your long values. My long, big values are to take care of myself and not put others before myself, always. But I choose it sometimes to sacrifice. But so the thing is that when I choose to help someone, unless it's a bloody emergency, like I'm going to drop everything, for that, but
Right.
that I'm going to make decisions from a place of self energy and groundedness, that's my bigger value.
And isn't that what Jesus talked about when he
Yeah.
said, love thy neighbor as thyself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where why are we always, at least I always grew up with the mentality of, no, I'm on the chopping block. I'm selfish by nature, so I have to chop myself off and love everybody else, but you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And as much as I love myself, I'll love others. As much as I give myself permission to have boundaries, I give others permission to have boundaries. I'm as much as I forgive myself, I forgive others, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we do have to wrap up soon here, but what other points would you like to cover before we go?
Yeah. Um, with OCD, the obsessions are either internally created or triggered by external things. And so just, oh, which is it? And then it's this persistent, unwanted thoughts, doubts, images that seem intrusive, inappropriate, irrational, senseless, disturbing, distressing. So looking for that. And there can be really inappropriate or forbidden thoughts, like inappropriate sexual thoughts and desires or fears that you might do things. And they're not in your conscious control. Those things are just, why am I having that thought? Like horrible dreams you might have, but then they show up and you believe you're going to do something, or you believe you might have accidentally done something inappropriate sexually. Um, the the fear of offending deity is a really big one, deliberately or inadvertently, and just really worrying about, if I did sin, did I repent enough? Going back through your life, is there some way that I was immoral, or could I possibly be blasphemous? Really scared of the punishing God. This persistent fear of doubt and uncertainty. Like there's just this deep sense of, I'm not okay, and I've got to find this okay state. And so you're just obsessing about these ongoing intrusive thoughts that are just noxious, like just harmful and poisonous and unpleasant, and they're fearful. So that's a higher level, where I wasn't living with those kind of things like constantly all the time. So that would be more clearly, well, that sounds like OCD. Like that's kind of unusual. But then there's just this subtle fear that my intention was wrong. Like, oh, wait, this feeling I'm having or this sensation is off, like the just right OCD, which I have. Just like, well, I'm doubting anything you can doubt. And it feels sinful to even doubt. Or you're using OCD as an excuse for your perceived sinful thoughts. Like, like, oh, well, I'm having a sinful thought. Well, it must be OCD. So then I'm not repenting of it. But wait, I can't call it OCD because I'm actually sinning. I need to actually repent. And so then you can get stuck in that cycle. And then you could believe that certain feelings and sensations are sinful that really aren't, like anger or sexual arousal. And you can start getting really freaked out every time you have a sexual arousal, or like checking if you're queer, or any kind of anger that shows up. That's a sin, so I can't have it. Or like, am I going to get possessed by Satan? Or I need to track down what wrong thing happened. So those are a lot of obsessions that can show up. Any questions about those before I go to the compulsions?
I don't have a question, but a thought came to me of just these sound so rooted in fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like we were talking about before, that like another term, like, or a definition, I guess you could say, of faith would also be like sitting in uncertainty. And so in a way, I do think like faith is the opposite of fear, because we are sitting in uncertainty and saying, this is actually okay. And fear drives us towards control, and
Yeah.
faith drives us towards surrender.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Anyway, just a thought there. But yes, please continue.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so repenting, we talked about that one. Repeating certain rituals until you feel like God has listened or accepted, or that your prayers are sufficient, or your offering. There's certain behaviors that if you do them, they help you remember that you aren't sinful. So you'll do them a lot. Um, like continually criticizing or inflicting physical punishment, like on yourself, even for your own moral thoughts. So like you have to punish yourself for that. And it like is a way to motivate yourself to be better. So you believe you have to do that. Some people even wash or bathe to get rid of unwanted or sinful thoughts or feelings, or head switch of like, if I move my head, I can get rid of that sinful thought. Or you might have bargains with your creator to try and bargain things out and find relief from guilt. Repetitive behaviors, like I mentioned, or thoughts where you ruminate to believe you can make it better, or like undo a bad thought. So you have a certain thought process that undoes the bad thought. Like some people with regular OCD might have to walk backwards in a certain way, or like, go redo it, or like move their arm backwards. And then those,
And that's a compulsion
yeah,
to like undo the thoughts, try to make it okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then those who ruminate or worry, they have a faulty belief that if they think about the concern long enough, they can make sense about it. Like they're going to come to this understanding. And I fall for that one often. My husband's like, you think there's a solution, right? I'm like, stop making fun of me. But he's not. He's being gentle, but that's how it feels.
Yes.
But this is a faulty belief. Like in Dr. McClendon, like in all of her years, like none of her clients have ever solved their scrupulous fears by rumination. Like we believe that we can. And then sacrificing joy and earthly privileges, like to show your devotion or your repentance, is, that self-sacrifice.
Well, and I'd say this sounds like a symbol of self flagellation,
Totally.
right? It's
Yeah.
just this is the new way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me correct myself and punish myself for my own inconsistencies or my own thoughts. And yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So with those compulsions, we think, well, some ways of logic thinks that should work. It lines up with some teachings, do those things right, it should work. But when you attempt to get rid of the unwanted thoughts, that backfires by increasing the frequency of the thoughts.
Yeah.
So like thought stopping, anytime you try to stop a thought or to get rid of thoughts, they increase. And and also like the search for certainty is an impossible quest. So that's why it's not going to work to do any of those.
Yeah.
And you're not able to falsify a false belief. So you don't end up learning that the compulsion is actually useless. So it's just like you just
Yeah.
keep going. You can't falsify it when it's false. Like there's going to be all these other reasons and justifications that come up. And
Yeah.
then the compulsions that you're doing interfere with your ability to learn that you can tolerate discomfort and obsessions and anxiety and fear and uncertainty, because you keep getting relief by not feeling it. And so you learn, like, I really can't tolerate that. I got to do it. and then the relief is only temporary, so that it keeps you spinning in the cycle, and you just have to keep doing the compulsion so it doesn't ever solve the obsession. And when you keep returning to complete the compulsions, it usually gets more dysfunctional over time. And like your rituals become more complex and take more time, and you avoid more things, and eventually they stop providing relief, and it has to get bigger or stronger.
Yeah. That's kind of the rock bottom where it's like, okay, I can only make sure the stove is turned off so many times, plus the locks are locked, plus it's like it takes me 30 minutes to get out of the house, and then an hour, and then 2 hours, and then now I don't leave. Okay. Now I've
Yes.
got to do something about this.
Yes.
That'd be the extreme. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is important, but there's like mental compulsions and there's private compulsions you do. We've talked, you can kind of put those into categories and looking at them, like searching the internet or scrutinizing in your mind. There's things that we do in public, and rituals we do in public, things that other people can see, but a lot of it is not. Things that we avoid. We talked about staying away from people, staying away from trigger situations, staying away from loved ones because you don't want to accidentally harm them, because you believe you have that thought will pop in. And then the reassurance seeking is probably the last thing that's important, is that you do this privately or publicly, and you're repeatedly seeking either confession that you're clean, or advice, or understanding, seeking certainty in some way on the same issues, but you're failing to find the solution. And so you might be making excessive internet searches, or, library, or whatever your method is to feel good about, like, am I good? Am I spiritually okay in the church? Or do I understand all the rules so I can follow them? Or do I understand all the nuance and so I can be okay? You might be asking a certain spiritual leader over and over again. This is where bishops don't understand, or church leaders, they're like answering their questions every single time they come. And that's feeding the loop.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um,
So in that instance, real quick, because yeah, if they're like, well, what about this? And what about this? And am I good enough for this? And am I clean enough? Da, da, da. And instead of coming at them with interview questions or something like that and saying, well, where's the discomfort? Or like
yeah,
some, like you're talking about, like the gentle questions of
yeah.
like, are you really looking for certainty for this? Or do you really believe God loves you? Or I don't know,
So
something to that
it's
extent.
complex there, and like bishops, like there's some trainings like on Annabella's website. She has a free PDF for bishops, and I'm going to meet with our stake. But it's a point where bishops just need to notice it, and then as gently as possible bring up the topic and see if they resonate with it, if they're willing to get diagnosed, and if they're willing to stretch their black and white view of repentance and God, and move it into a bigger picture. And if the bishop's going to say, if you make an appointment with me again about these same topics, I'm not going to listen to the confessions. We're going to talk about mercy and love and grace. But
Mm.
I literally can't let you tell me that you did those things wrong again. But that right there is not a place for a bishop to do that. That's all very therapeutical. But if the bishop is working with the therapist, then the therapist can teach them, hey, this is how to respond to this person. But if the bishop's just trying to do it on his own and like teach them therapy and stuff, like
Yeah.
and so usually bishops and therapists meet together and figure out these are the tenets of our faith, and these are the things that, because some therapists will try to expose the person to things that are against their religion, like I can't look at those immoral pictures, and they have to understand, like a therapist who really understands OCD is not going to ask them to do something that goes against their morals. They're going to help.
Yeah.
So
And for people that are maybe curious about getting diagnosed, could be scary for some people. Um, is it an in-depth process? Is it hard to do? And after you do, does that what would be the conclusions after that? Do you find a therapist there, or is that done through a therapist? Where do you go from there?
yeah, so the International OCD Federation website has all the answers there, and you would need to find a therapist that is specifically trained in OCD after their master's. It's not in their master's degree, meaning therapists don't have that specialized training. They'll know what OCD is, but not enough to be able to catch it or diagnose it. And so, like, I have a document that I can share that says, here's the things that you want to look for. Someone who focuses mostly just on anxiety and OCD, like that's what they do, and they specialize on that. Or they've been trained by the IOCD Federation, or things like that. And so they'll just have like you could get diagnosed in one session. If you have a really sticky case, it might take more than that to try and figure out. Like I had someone I thought was scrupulosity, and they had, I can't remember the word, but when you're worried about existential OCD, and it's kind of similar,
Oh,
like,
interesting.
yeah. So there's just sometimes different subsets that you are slightly different. But anyway, yeah. So you get the diagnosis. You might have a different reaction. So you would want to have a therapist, another appointment scheduled, um, and then just decide, am I going to go through the treatment right now? Am I going to do something to help me feel okay about this for a while? And there's all kinds of options for treatment, whether it's a treatment facility, like 3 hours a day, every day, or doing therapy once a week and moving slow, or twice a week. Depends on how intense your reaction is or how intense it's affecting your life.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Jill, for all of this information. This is, I feel so important, but this is such an in-depth, wonderful conversation to just be able to know like examples and to have all of this overview, I think is so useful. So thank you for that. Any takeaways before we close, or any closing statements you'd love to share?
There's a lot of misconceptions and reasons it's misdiagnosed. And so if something just doesn't feel right, or if you're just not feeling as overall peaceful or happy, like, why not check?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love that you brought up too, it's usually misdiagnosed as just depression and anxiety. because there are so many people with that. So if it seems like something's not working or it seems like there might be something more, yeah, please check. Maybe it's this. Thank you for sharing your experience and being so vulnerable in your own experiences, your story, bringing this depth of knowledge, and hopefully we're able to share it with some. I hope any of the listeners that this is good for you. I'm sure we'll talk again some more. Appreciate you being here, Jill, and sharing your time and your information. And we will talk next time. Thanks so much and stay conscious and curious. Thank you, Jill. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care.